Okay. Welcome to the Exchange info session. My name's Stacey Bryant, and I'll be presenting today's session along with my colleague, Nina Inokali. The purpose for today's session is to provide you information about the Exchange program. So before we get started, we just want to acknowledge the land on which we work and live. The Simon Fraser University's 3 campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kaikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tawasin peoples. And we just wanted to acknowledge that before we begin. So I'll be presenting the first half, and then Nina will present the second half. So to begin with, what is study abroad? So study abroad is an umbrella term for the programs and arrangements that allow you to travel and study elsewhere in the world while working towards your degree. So what does that mean? We have broadly a few different types of programs. So we have the exchange program where you can study at one of SFU's host institutions for 1 or 2 terms. You can take courses that work towards your requirements. So that could be towards your major, your minor, potentially WQB credits, and you bring that credit back towards your SFU degree. This generally, it involves paying tuition to SFU. There are some institutions that are direct fee paying programs where you pay your tuition and fees directly to that institution. These are University of California, Berkeley summer sessions, Beijing Institute of Technology, and Korea University International Summer Campus as of September 2021. And generally, an exchange would be a full-time, you would be a full-time SFU student if you were doing an exchange. This session will mainly be focused on exchanges, but when we discuss eligibility, the application, when we call it exchange, this also incorporates short-term summer programs and virtual exchanges. We will talk a little bit more about those specifically in a few minutes, but the eligibility and the application and everything is the same. Today, we won't be talking about field schools. Field schools are a different type of program. They're group-led programs led by SFU faculty with a cohort of students. They're often open to non-SFU students as well, but you're going with SFU faculty member into the field and you're learning, you're doing experiential learning in the field. So in 2021, we had 3 virtual field school programs. Field schools for 2022 haven't yet been announced, but if you are interested in learning more about field schools or attending a field school info session in the future, you can contact fieldschools@sfu.ca for more information. So why study abroad? There are a lot of different reasons that students might choose to study abroad, and they can often be overlapping. So personally, you might want to travel, and you can travel while you're earning credits, experience a new country. In many cases, you can go back to your home country and do an exchange. There are a few limitations on that, but that is an option for many students. You can learn a new language. So maybe you want to live in a new language and immerse yourself in that language. Or maybe you want to take classes at the host institution in a language that you can't actually study at SFU. So perhaps something like Korean or Swahili, so something different. Creating a worldwide network, whether that's friends, academic connections, maybe it's future employment connections. This can be a really big draw for some students. Then there's the academics. So you're gaining an international perspective on your degree. So getting to learn your subject area from a different perspective, or maybe taking something that you wouldn't have the opportunity to take at SFU. It can also look really good on a resume or a grad school application. So when you're applying to grad school, it shows that international perspective. It's also an opportunity to kind of get a taster for what a school is like. If you're considering going to grad school at that school, you could go there for a semester and see if you liked it before applying to do grad school there. and working towards your specific degree requirements. So you can take courses towards your major. So maybe you're studying something and you want to take courses directly towards that, but from a different perspective. Professionally, so you might pick a location based on your area of study and your area of career interest. So perhaps you want to study best business practices in Asia or public health policy in Scandinavia for health science students. You might pick an area specific to your subject area. And then, of course, that international experience to highlight on your resume, and then potential to make connections for maybe an international co-op term. And then financially, you're paying SFU tuition, like I said, at the vast majority of our partner institutions, with just a few exceptions. If you are a full-time student and you're doing an in-person exchange, there is funding available. And the cost of living. So you'll want to think about the cost of living in the host country. So Vancouver is actually a very expensive city to live. So you might want to consider when you're doing your research, if you want to try and find somewhere that's like on the cheaper side, it could actually be cheaper for the cost of living while you're on exchange. And we'll talk a little bit more again about funding options later on, but funding is available as well. So virtual exchanges. So this is a new accessible way to internationalize your degree and your resume, kind of getting the best of both worlds with studying globally and living locally. So you're still getting that different academic experience. You're experiencing a new academic system, meeting other students virtually, getting that intercultural experience. You could take courses part-time and maybe combine those with SFU courses if you wanted to, or you could take courses full-time. We do have some virtual exchange partners that offer ongoing virtual exchange programs. And yeah, you can do that from at home without having, or wherever you like. It doesn't have to be from home. So it just gives that flexibility. So this is what our study abroad system looks like when you look at the destinations page. So you can search by subject area. So if you're looking for a summer program, for example, if you look at the term area, or sorry, if you look at the type of program, if you're wanting a full term summer program, you would type in type of program exchange, the term summer. If you wanted to do a short term summer program, you would put in the type of program short term summer. So this sort of helps you navigate to see, do you want to do a full summer semester, or do you want to do a short-term summer program, or do you want to do an exchange in the fall? Because the terms don't always line up. So that can help you navigate that. And keep in mind that when you're using this, this should generally be used as a guide, particularly the subject area filter. So you can search by destination and subject area, but this is for the purpose of helping you navigate this site. So you'll want to kind of look into it further as well. So right now, when you look at this page, you'll notice that it says the application is closed for the terms available. This will be updated before the application actually launches later in the fall term, and then you'll be able to see the terms you can apply for. So this is an example of the exchange terms available document. This is posted when the application launches before each deadline. So this was from the January 2021 deadline. We'll have another one that we'll post when we launch the application later in the fall. And that will be for the 2022 deadline. So the January 2022 deadline. So you'll be able to see which terms are available where. So a little bit on short-term summer programs. So with two exceptions, our short-term summer programs are paid to the host institution, or sorry, there are two exceptions where you actually pay your tuition to the host institution. So your tuition and fees are paid to the host institution for the University of California, Berkeley, and for their virtual and in-person programs, and the Korea University International Summer Campus. So for those are direct fee paying programs where you pay your tuition fees to those institutions. For the rest of the short-term summer programs, as of September 2021, they are your tuition and fees are paid to SFU. So these are similar to exchanges. You would study at one of SFU's host institutions. They're offered by over 30 of SFU's exchange host institutions. They range from 1 to 10 weeks, and you can get 3 to 12, the equivalent of 3 to 12 SFU units. They're a bit different in that they also include special social programming a lot of the time. So they'll have different programming, field trips, and they can also be, so that can be a great way to get to know a city. And there's also often fewer local students than in the fall and spring. So it's often more of an international program. So who can go on exchange? Everyone can go on exchange. There's opportunities for all disciplines. So whether that's working towards your major, your minor, your WQB, if you want to do electives, part of the application process is actually meeting with your academic advisor to talk about how an exchange is going to work into your plans, so that you can make sure that that's going to be the right fit for you at that time. So in order to be eligible for exchange, you need to meet the exchange eligibility requirements by the application that you're applying at, the application deadline that you're applying at. So if you wanted to apply for the January 2022 application deadline, you would need to meet these requirements after the fall 2021 term. So you need to be an SFU degree seeking student, have a declared or intended major or minor. You need 36 units completed at that time of application, and at least 12 of those have to have been done at SFU. You also need a 2.67 CGPA, although some institutions do have higher CGPA requirements, and if you wanted to apply for those institutions, you would also need to meet their CGPA requirements. And those you can find on each program page for the different institutions. If you don't meet the CGPA eligibility, and only the CGPA eligibility, you can't appeal the unit requirement. There is a CGPA exchange eligibility appeal process. You must meet one of the eligibility criteria or both that are listed. And that application is separate from the exchange application. So you do need to do both. You'll need to wait until your fall 2021 grades are out, and you'll need to look at these criteria. And so I've encountered unique circumstances that have affected my previous academic performance and are unlikely to affect future performance. So if that is something that you feel you would qualify for, you could apply under just that one. If you also have a CGPA of below 2.67, but have achieved a term GPA of 2.67 or higher in the past 2 full-time terms at SFU, or over the past 18 units at SFU if you've been studying part-time. If you have both of those, you can apply under both. If it's just the latter, you can apply just under the latter. Just the first one, you can apply just under the first one. So you just check off which criteria you're applying under. So for the January deadline, January 2022, the exchange application deadlines, separate from the eligibility appeal, the exchange application deadlines will be January 15th for some institutions and January 25th for other institutions. The exchange eligibility appeal deadline, to apply for that, will be January 15th, regardless of which exchange application you're applying for. So that means that if you're applying for the January 15th exchange application, because you've picked institutions that have that deadline, and all of that will be posted online when the application launches, then you would need to be submitting your eligibility appeal application and your exchange application at the same time. So they'd both be for January 15th. If you're applying for the January 25th exchange application deadline, you still need to submit your exchange eligibility appeal for January 15th. You would, in most cases, find out about the results of that eligibility appeal before January 25th. but you wouldn't have much time in there. So we'd recommend working on both at the same time. So you're working on your exchange application alongside the exchange eligibility application. And you can find the exchange eligibility appeal application on the eligibility webpage. One other thing to note is that the CGPA requirements for specific institutions can't be appealed. So if there's a 3.0 requirement for one of our partner institutions, that can't be appealed. If your exchange eligibility appeal application is approved, you'll only be able to apply for institutions that have a 2.67 CGPA requirement. So when can you go on exchange? So exchanges are available every term. There are more options for the fall and spring. SFU's trimester system actually isn't universal, so you'll generally find that there's fewer options in the summer. You'll want to plan in advance for an exchange to try and avoid your last term being on exchange. It is possible to go on your exchange in your last term. It's just not recommended, and that's for a few reasons. So one, there's no guarantee of what classes you will take or how they'll come back. So if you're at the very end of your degree, it just leaves a lot less flexibility if the classes don't come back to SFU as you had thought they would. It also takes time to process exchange credit. So it could end up resulting in requiring you to defer your graduation. And if you're an international student, we'd also recommend that you speak with an international student advisor about potential implications of ending your degree on an exchange term. And Nina's going to talk a little bit more about the exchange credit process later as well. So when can you apply? So as I mentioned, the next deadline is January 15th and January 25th, 2022, depending on the institution or institutions you're applying for. So applications will open late November in fall 2021. And that application deadline is going to be for exchanges in summer 22, fall 2022, and spring 2023. So these will be for virtual and in-person exchanges. Then there'll be another deadline in May 2022. The exact date still to be confirmed. And that will be for very limited options for fall 2022, and those options might only be virtual. And remaining spaces for spring 2023 that were not filled from the January deadline. So where can you go on exchange? Everybody's favorite question. There are more than 130 host institutions in over 45 countries to choose from. These include some preferred partnerships, so ones for business students, health sciences, engineering, and lots of open partnerships that are for students across the university. So you can find options for your major, your minor, or your electives. We do have some direct fee paying institutions, as I've mentioned, where you pay your tuition and fees to the host institution based on their rates, not paid to SFU. They always say direct fee paying in the program title. And I've mentioned the three we have right now that fall under that: University of California, Berkeley Summer Sessions, Beijing Institute of Technology, and Korea University International Summer Campus. And again, that's as of September 2021. So how many exchanges can you do? It's possible to do up to 30 exchange units, which usually is about 2 terms. You could do those back to back if you wanted to. So back to back at one institution. You could do them back to back at different institutions. So one semester at one institution, one semester at another. With that, you will want to keep in mind the term dates for exchanges. And that's something we'll touch on a little bit later about how the terms don't always quite line up with SFU's terms. You can also do an exchange term, come back and study at SFU for a bit, and do another exchange term. One thing that's important to point out is that if you have 46 or more transfer units, you'll need to speak with your academic department or faculty advisor about residency requirements. So this just limits the number of exchange units you might be able to take, but you'll still be able to go on exchange, just the number of exchange units you can take may be lower. So when you're researching your host institution, you'll want to think outside of the SFU box. So Not every institution calls things what we call them at SFU. So that's part of the experience of studying abroad, is experiencing this different academic system, different terminology. So the education systems differ from one country to the next. So term dates, like I mentioned before, is a big one. So some university terms will actually overlap with two of SFU's term dates. They might also not be called fall, spring, summer. They could be called semester 1, semester 2, or autumn semester. There's also different types of accommodations. So in addition to on-campus and off-campus, you might have third-party off-campus accommodations. You'll want to think about the costs. So a single flat is obviously going to be more expensive than having 3 roommates. Academics is another one where you'll find that it really varies. So subject names, availability of courses, restrictions, kind of how that all works. So subject names and how they're categorized is a big one. So for example, communications might not actually have their own department. Communications courses, like courses that come back to SFU as communications, could be found in the arts, or maybe they're in science or under media studies. They also might not be called the same thing. So kinesiology is one that I always find interesting. It's commonly called sports science. So you'll need to think outside of the terminology that you're used to. Courses might also not be available in every term. So in the terms you're applying for, it's your responsibility to do the research and you do a proposed study plan and have a good selection of backup courses while you're planning, in case the ones you want aren't available, or they're restricted, or you're not able to get into them. And the restrictions are usually listed on the exchange page or the department courses page, but it's different for every institution. Another difference is the terminology for things like classes, calendar, units, credits. And it can make the research difficult because you're trying to navigate this sort of new approach, this new terminology. So modules, for example, is a terminology for what we call courses. So rather than how many courses are you going to take, it might be how many modules are you going to take. And they might use the word course to mean faculty or program. So it's just a different way of navigating the system. The unit and credit system, that's going to be another one that's often different. So the ratio of the credit will vary based on the institution. So for example, 10 European credit transfer system credits, so ECTS they call it, might be equal to 5 SFU units. So you'll be able to find those ratios on our program pages for the institutions. Grading systems is another one. So at SFU, many students are used to continual assessment. So you do a variety of assignments throughout the term, you get feedback, you improve, you can improve upon it, and that you have a final exam or paper, but there are many things throughout the term. That's how many courses are run at SFU. Of course, not all, but many. You may find at some institutions that you are assessed fully based on one assignment or one exam. So getting sort of accustomed to that can be quite a transition. On the reverse side, when students are coming here on exchange, they often find that that's difficult as well, going from having one assignment or one exam, and now they're having to do things throughout the whole semester. So it's really just an experience of learning how to navigate a new system. The grading system may also be different. So when I studied in England, I found that I got a D, and I thought, oh goodness, a D, but actually a D is distinction. So that was actually a very good mark. So it's just getting used to this new grading system. You might also be assessed in different ways. So perhaps instead of writing an exam, maybe you'll have an oral exam. The amount of information provided by the professor may also vary. So course outlines might not be as detailed as what you commonly find at SFU. And yeah, you can find a lot of this, a lot of the nuance on the program page is a great place to start. So the program page in the study abroad system, then you go over to their web pages, and then you can, of course, always ask us if you're having difficulty. One thing to keep in mind and pay special attention to is the language of instruction. So if you're wanting to take courses in English, you will want to look for that. And I'm going to hand this over to Nina now to talk about exchange credit.
Great. Thank you so much, Stacy, for the presentation. I'm just setting up on my side as well. Hi, everybody. Thanks again. So to move along to exchange credits, exchange credits are different from transfer credits, and you can receive exchange credits if, for example, you pass a course according to the host institution's definition of pass and is deemed by SFU to be an academic credit-bearing course and is also listed on your host institution transcript. And it can't be a duplicate of a course that you've already completed at SFU. So if you've done a class, maybe you've done really well or poorly in a class, but you want to do something, if it looks like it's a similar course, you will not actually receive a duplicate credit for the course. So it won't take over any grade that you may have had at SFU and will not be permitted to transfer back. So you can't have a duplicate course, but you, in the end, you also need to apply for exchange credit prior to your graduation for you to actually receive your credit. And as I mentioned, as exchange credits are different from transfer credits, they will come back on your SFU record as exchange credits. And however, will not count towards your SFU CGPA. So it won't, the grade itself won't show up on your transcript, although you will receive credit as long as you've applied for it and can get the credit. Will show up on your SFU transcript. The one thing, even though we say it doesn't count towards your SFU GPA, is for graduate school applications. So for example, if you're hoping to apply for graduate school in the future, your SFU transcript may not have those grades. However, graduate schools will often request all post-secondary transcripts, which would also include the one that you did on your exchange. So that one might come back and, you know, be seen in terms of the average of your SFU and your exchange. So keeping that in mind, we still want you to do your best and try your best for future applications too. So for scholarship students, we recommend that you connect with your scholarship advisor to see if there's any requirements that you need to meet with regards to your grades or credit numbers that you do on your exchange to maintain your scholarship during or when you return from your exchange. Great. So if we could move to the next slide, perfect. So for exchange credit, depending on the content of the course, it may either transfer back as an exact match to an SFU course, for example, Paul 349, or a subject match, but not an exact course match. So this could be Paul 3XX, it could be an upper division, it could be a lower division as well, or potentially for general credit only. So these are the cases where SFU does not offer a related subject or where the credit isn't approved by applicable SFU department. So we try our best to work with you with the department areas that you hope to receive credit from. So you will have an option to make your choice that you want, say, political science for this one, or maybe you want international studies. So you would put your examples of the types of course you hope it to be, or you would hope it to come back to at SFU. However, if not, we will be looking at general credit only as like, for example, a GE1XX type course. And so there is also something to consider that the credit system at SFU is quite different from those around the world, and would recommend that you look at exchange credit ratio posted on each host university and institution profile to determine how much the course would be worth here at SFU. So when you click into your destination, there is a line item that says exchange credit ratio that you can look into, and they might be different. So even if you're looking at Australia, the credit ratios within one university might actually be different from another institution. So make sure you're double checking your credit ratio and understand what credits when you're taking when you go on your exchange. And the way that you process your courses and how they come back to SFU will be done through the exchange credit process. So it must be coming back and applied for you to receive your grades and for your credits. And next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to go through an exchange quiz in the format of a quiz, and I encourage you to play along to see how much you know, or maybe how many things might have been missed. So the first question, the grades from your exchange don't count towards your SFU CGPA. So these are true or false questions. So the answer is true. So again, it's not on your SFU transcript. However, as I mentioned about graduate school applications, I do recommend that you flag them. If you're hoping to do grad school, you do try your best so you can improve your GPA overall. And for scholarship students, as I mentioned earlier as well, double check in with your scholarship advisor for your grades and how they might transfer back or impact your future terms. The next question, I can't do an exchange because I'm an international student. This is actually false, mostly. And we'll say that in that exchange is open to all eligible SFU students. However, there might be some restrictions for students who are wanting to return and study back in their home country. So double check, and as Stacey's also already mentioned, meet with an international student advisor to discuss any possible implications and really your ability to apply for postgraduate work permit and comply with enrollment restriction or requirements for your term and at SFU. So next question. There we go. It's possible to do both an exchange and co-op during your SFU degree. So this is actually true. So it's possible to do both during your degree, so during your SFU degree, and is strongly encouraged. However, I do want to put a caveat that it would usually be in a different term. So you wouldn't do both in the same term. I'd often have students who do a co-op before they do an exchange to help fund their exchange, or international co-op is possibly another option as well. I've had a student who studied abroad and was able to make those connections that really could be an international co-op as well, or other students who've actually done international co-op following their exchange. So really another possibility. And if that's the case, we do recommend connecting with your co-op advisor in advance to leave that option available for yourself. So the next question, most courses on exchange are taught in English. And the answer to this one is true. So at most of our partner institutions, we do have English taught options. It's often a myth that all of the options on exchange or many options are taught in a different language. While that might be the case, there are many English taught options that are available. So if you look under destinations and look on the search, you can check out the language of instruction under academics. And when you click there, you'll be able to see the language of instruction of the courses. Great. So do have a look on the program page to do your research as well. Thanks, Stacey. So next slide, how much does an exchange cost? So for the SFU exchange applications, there is no application fee. However, there is a $150 confirmation fee, which is applied to your student account. And this is after the opt-out deadline. And if you are nominated for your exchange, that opt-out deadline will be very clear to you, and you'd be notified in your nomination letter. For your tuition, each full-time spring and fall term for an exchange, you would be considered full-time and you would pay 12 SFU units at the base rate and student fees. However, you would not be paying your UPass fee. So it is a 12 unit. So regardless of the number that you actually take on your exchange, whether it be 11 units on exchange or 14 units on exchange, you're still paying 12 units at SFU for the full-time program. And also I should include some summer full-time program as well with the 12 unit rate. There's also the direct fee paying one where tuition and fees are paid directly to the host institution, which Stacey's outlined in the earlier slides. So those specific institutions will have direct fee paying directly within the title of the program. So those ones you will pay directly to the host institution. And I will flag here for our direct fee paying programs, actually I'll in the next slide, but you will pay directly. So if you are in a scholarship program, for example, those ones that would cover SFU fee, you would not be eligible if it were a direct fee paying program. So for the exchange and how much does it cost, the rest is individual. So for further research, have a look at the exchange reports and the questionnaires and the host institution websites as well. As they will provide all the information that you need and ideally provide you with more on the ground information in terms of the cost of living as well. So please check those out directly on the host institution page. And also the funding and cost page on our website, the Study Abroad website, does have some cost estimates and funding, and having a look at those, again, having a look at the exchange reports and questionnaires is a great way to go. For those of you who are considering virtual exchange, however, you will not have those travel costs and can live currently where you are. So there are no additional costs. So for financial aid, there are, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a funding page that you can get to from our website. So search from the Study Abroad website, search on the left-hand navigation to funding. And from there, you'll be able to explore your options. And some opportunities for funding may be on pause during this time. However, that would be noted. You would be able to search for those when you go directly to some of the funding options. For the full-time programs where you're paying fees to SFU, you would qualify for loans, bursaries, and scholarships to most universities. So you would want to double check those institutions and directly with financial aid and awards. If you have any questions, you can check on your term dates to make sure or double check that those would be eligible institutions. And also for part-time funding, there are limited funding options, but there are some, for example, for your student loans, for part-time loans. Then there's also direct fee paying. So although you're not eligible for funding through SFU or loans, you can see if the partner institution has any funding options that might be that you may be eligible for. For virtual exchange, tuition and fees are paid to SFU, and you're eligible for the regular funding. However, you will not be eligible for study abroad specific funding for the virtual exchange program. And so that funding, depending if you're a part-time on virtual exchange or full-time on a virtual exchange, those funding options might be full-time type funding or part-time, more limited funding. So do connect with financial aid and awards, again, if you have any questions about your funding options. And for additional awards that are available, the Suite of Study Abroad Awards, which is embedded in the exchange application, are awards that are available to you. There are many awards within that category that you might be eligible for. So I do encourage you to apply when you submit your study abroad or your exchange application. There's also some external awards and scholarships that I encourage you to look into, and you can have a look on our website through some links to the external awards and also on the financial aid and awards website as well. So for more information, again, FAA is the place to go for that. And as I mentioned about the scholarship students, please do speak with your scholarship advisor regarding any restrictions or requirements you must meet for your exchange. So regarding your, for the exchange website, wanting to just walk you through what that might look like. So study abroad / exchange. And right now the application is closed. However, when it's open for the January deadline, we will have some new language on this website. And on the left-hand navigation there, you'll see under exchanges where there's destinations, eligibility application, and funding and costs through the website that I was mentioning earlier. So you can navigate to those bars and read through all those pages while you're planning for your exchange. One thing I didn't mention earlier with the financial aid page is there is a budget page that I would also encourage you to look into when you do the application, and would be linked on the application site as well. And the next slide, please. So for the destinations website, Stacey showed this in an earlier slide, but you would come here to search for the programs and see what terms are available for that. And right now it does say application closed. However, when you do come back to your application or come back at the end of November, you'll be able to see which programs are open. And for the January deadline, you'll find that most programs will reopen and be offered for you to apply. Or sorry, for the January deadline. I hope I said that. All right, so the next slide, please. So the next slide here, we're just showing you a snapshot of one of our institutions, Universiteit van Amsterdam, or University of Amsterdam. And basically, this is what you would go to if you actually found the website from the study abroad system. You'll see the level of study that it's offered for, so undergraduate or graduate. Most of the programs that we have offered on our program pages are all open to undergraduate students. Then when it says open to, you'll want to search to make sure it's either students in all SFU disciplines or in your area of study. So there are some institutions that might be specific to certain faculties. So that's something that you can look to make sure that you're eligible for it in terms of all the categories here. So the GPA as well for undergraduate, graduate, and any application notes that might be a flag for you to consider whether or not it would be a good fit for you. So check out all the program information, the eligibility and term dates as well. Some terms will overlap with SFU terms, and making sure that that's going to be a good fit for you. Great, so the next slide, please. So the next slide here is for your application. The application as a whole is, there's quite a lot of documents, but it's like that in a way to be really comprehensive for a reason. A lot of the requirements that we have on the website might be used for a further application. So that's why it is quite comprehensive. All of these documents must be submitted by the application deadline. And what we have flagged here, a couple asterisks, is for you to meet with your professor or your advisor early in the application process. So there's the advisor discussion worksheet, as well as the academic reference form. Those are the items that we ask you to do in advance. So you're actually asking other people to do things for you, for example, with the advisor discussion worksheet. And with the reference, we are looking for you to request for them to give you permission to use their name in the reference. And so once you actually see all of the reference instructions come out, you can contact your professor, but it's a great time now to connect with them and to make those connections, with your professors in advance. So we have the academic referee. That's something that you can connect with your prof about. And the next one being your institution selection. So you would select up to 3 preferences in one application. So if you are thinking of applying for more than one institution, more than one term, so maybe you want to apply for a summer program at one institution and you want to follow up with a fall program at another institution. If you're doing back-to-back at different institutions, I would recommend connecting with study abroad advisor, officer, to make sure that that's going to be a good fit for you, and that the term dates aren't overlapping, just to double check. But if you know your programs and the way that you're planning out your exchange, you would want to apply for one program in one term. For example, if you're the summer term, you would pick your up to 3 choices for the summer term. And following that, if you're hoping to do a fall exchange, you would do that as a separate application. So again, 2 separate applications if you want to go in 2 terms. However, if you want one application and you're looking for many different ones, you would just pick those and rank them in order of preference. So And so then moving on to your academic documents, we have your SFU advising transcript that you need to submit. If you are or have attended another institution in the past, the other transcript is optional, but if you only have maybe 12 units of SFU study, I would highly recommend adding your other transcript for your application. And then we talked about the advisor discussion worksheet, the proposed study plan, where you do need to double check to ensure that you have, you're looking at the term for which you hope to go on your exchange. So your spring 2023 exchange term that you're hoping to go might not be available, but you can look back at past spring terms in order for you to see what's generally offered in the spring. So spring to spring, fall to fall, just in the same way you would normally schedule your own courses, perhaps at SFU. Then there's the statement of interest. In the statement of interest, you can consider that similar to a written interview. So look at the questions, how you might answer that in an interview is something that you would want to consider a concise answer for the statement of interest. And all the personal documents are those that would also be included, uploaded for your application. So that includes your exchange student acknowledgement and your exchange student waiver and release. So those items are very important that you do look through carefully. If you have questions about those documents, please feel free to connect with us as well. And at the end, we do have a suite of study abroad awards that, again, is open to all students and encourage you to apply and submit an application within your exchange application. So in the next slide, please. So I do want to also discuss COVID-19 and study abroad. There is continued uncertainty for study abroad programs, not only for spring 22, but it may also continue for the 2022 and 2023 year. As you apply and consider applying for your exchanges, we do encourage you to apply for the program that you are interested in and should consider that there may be future in-person cancellations as well. So keeping that in mind while you move forward. As you can see, we have canceled in-person programs since the pandemic began, and they have been curtailed or canceled. However, virtual exchanges are a new possibility, so that might be a nice option for you to consider as well. I do encourage you to check out our website for full considerations, and those are the links that are also posted on most of the websites when you scroll through our pages. Really, your health and safety are most important to us, and so please do check in if you are interested in an in-person exchange on these COVID considerations and updates. And next slide. Great. And so you would have a look on our advising hours on the study abroad system. And this is how you would schedule your advising. You would schedule them by Zoom or phone in the appointments tab in Horizons. This system may change. So if and when it does change, you can have a look on the study abroad site for the most up-to-date method of booking your appointments. So next slide. And so you'll see our email addresses and information here. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us now that you've seen this whole information session. And yeah, look forward to seeing your exchange applications in the coming year. Thanks very much, everybody.